All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this panel. We're going to talk about wearables, the market landscape, some of the lessons learned, and also some of the opportunities in the space. My name is Tim Chang. I'm a managing director with the Mayfield Fund. We're an early stage venture capital firm based in Silicon Valley. I've been playing in the wearables area for a while. I co-founded and funded a company called beSUCCESS, which was recently acquired by Intel for more than $130 million. It's had a lot of interesting lessons learned there, which we'll be comparing notes on with these founders. And very excited to have two of the leading entrepreneurs and thought leaders, pioneers in this space. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and their product, and then we'll just jump right into questions. So Sonny, how about we start with you?
Yeah, I'm Sonny, CEO and founder of Misfit.
My name's Eric from Pebble. I didn't mention this during the talk, but Pebble's a watch that works with both iPhone and Android phones, which is, I guess, a bit rare these days.
That is rare, yeah. Normally, you can have to focus on just one and barely get that thing launched, right? Very good. Thanks for sharing your startup stories. It was very inspirational and some very good lessons learned for entrepreneurs in the audience, right? So
is that 130 number around basis the public number now? I didn't know.
Well, I'll just say it's somewhere around that neighborhood.
Similar,
right?
Okay.
So my job is to ask some of the obvious questions, but maybe also explore some of the non-obvious considerations in this space as well. You know, the super obvious low-hanging fruit question I think people wonder about is, what's the best way to build a defensive moat against the big guys like Apple, Google, others coming into the space? What are some of your views? Is it some of the sensor science, or is it more, you know, the software side or developer ecosystem? Would love to get your take on that. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
It's a good question, and I think it comes up more and more. Just to preface the answer, I think that at the end of the day, I feel like we have the biggest control over our destiny. I think that when you start thinking about competitors, you start trying to guess and make guesses what Apple's going to do or guesses what Google's going to do. It's very difficult, and it's usually time-consuming and not as productive as focusing on building what you're going to build. So I mean, your question was very good. It's like, what are you doing in general to provide, you know, a strong basis? And I think for us, and I think for Sonny as well, just speaking from him, the platform is the most important thing. Figuring out how does your software and your hardware provide the basis for other people to use it and other developers to build on top of it. Yeah. So in our case, we're laser focused on that, figuring out how can other people build their dream experience on top of Pebble. And if we can focus on that, provide a good experience to users while simultaneously making it possible for developers to also have their own users, then I feel like that's our angle for defensibility.
Yeah, makes sense. Sonny?
Well, I'll just highlight some of what Eric was saying, and we too dream someday of having what Eric's got, which is a bunch of developers working on his platform. You know, we're working from a slightly different approach. We're making a number of ambient as well as wearable products, and our approach to the platform so far has been work with brands that are meaningful, that are interesting. Like we have a partnership with Coca-Cola, getting us into places where other companies might have a hard time getting into. Other thing is accessories. We found that we're finding brands interested in working with us on building accessories that have a story that is meaningful to people. Because when you talk about wearables, it's a very personal and intimate type of thing, and so making sure that something that people can relate to, even beyond just functionality. In terms of functionality, one of the things that we have worked on and focused on for a long time has been power management. We really see that as a big deal in wearables. It's hard, and so our philosophy so far has been no charging. And no matter what anyone comes out with, we suspect that for the next several generations of smartwatches will require charging. And so I think we're good in that space for a while.
Here, just to add on to your points, you made a point during your presentation, Sonny, around the turnaround factor, which is when you leave your house, is this something that you're going to remember to take with you? I think what that shows is a sign of engagement. It's a sign that your customers and your users are actively using your product, and just by the de facto standard that they're wearing it every day, it provides value in their life. And there's a lot to be said for something that has high engagement and provides value to the end customer, because it's so easy to just take something off especially in wearables.
Yeah, absolutely. And to build on that, I think, to be completely honest, I don't know if activity tracking will pass the turnaround test. I actually don't think it will pass the turnaround test. We're hoping to kind of sneak in there by not forcing people to take it off their bodies, that we won't have to pass the turnaround test because it's always on them. Now with Pebble, you have a much stronger use case, and so you can actually, I would turn around for my Pebble. It's like my favorite smartwatch. I have like huge crush on Pebble, so it's I'm always talking about their stuff.
Very cool.
Not that we're going to make a smartwatch.
So let's dive into this thing. I agree with you. Platforms are the holy grail. You measure those by the number of developers you have, the number of killer apps out there, the number of third parties building on your platform. But one of the big holy grail questions is, do you need to own the OS to be the platform? That's a big debate because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Android's just going to be the Android of smartwatches or wearables. Other folks are saying, well, not quite. Android is already optimized for smartphone, and it's very rare to just port something over and have that be best of breed. So there still is white space to be the Android of wearables.
So I think there's two questions in there. One is, how successful are other platforms going to be, like other operating system platforms going to be, and then the other one is, can other hardware makers rely on a third-party software vendor, I guess, because at the end of the day, the products that we use on a regular basis have a really tightly meshed software and hardware experience. I don't actually know the answer. I think this is something that we're interested in investigating, like how does Pebble work if you have just the Pebble operating system and it's running on a different piece of hardware? This is a question that I wouldn't have been able to even get started on answering 2 years ago, because when you're a small startup and when you're just a couple guys working on a project, you have to build your own thing. You have to do everything, kind of going about you have to do what you can control. And as a small company, you have to build the software, you have to build the hardware, you have to build everything, the entire experience. Now, we're in a position where we have a brand, we have a set of followers, people who are fans of what we do. We have the flexibility where we can go and sell our operating system or license our operating system. We have the flexibility where we can use other bits of software and add it into our network. I don't actually know the answer, and it's interesting.
I think we're all trying to figure that out. Sonny, was there a time you even considered, hey, should we try running our device on Android or other third-party OSs as well?
Yeah, so for us, we've focused on a couple of things. Wearability, incredible wearability, which we've already talked about through no charging, beauty, and brands and stories and whatnot. The other part of it is the science. So, we have, we don't have 10 PhDs on staff doing step counting all day long. The idea is that we want to our Misfit biomechanical algorithms and physiological analysis algorithms are actually available. And so our standing offer to folks have been, it doesn't have to run on the Shine and on Misfit hardware. We would love to have our algorithms available on other hardware. And so we're not really that, I guess you would say we're agnostic to hardware, not only to software platforms, but to hardware as well. So if there is an iPod Watch coming out, we would love to run on that, build an app that runs on that. I still believe there are probably killer apps that are going to come out that may only be possible in a wearable context. And if those apps can run Misfit algorithms, love it, So that's the approach we've been taking.
So part of that defensibility we talked about is your sensor science, the algorithms there, which aren't as easy necessarily for hardware companies to knock off, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the approach.
Makes sense. Good. Speaking on the team part, Eric, you talked about having to build everything yourself, and we live this at BASIS as well. I would probably argue we didn't have even enough software people or underestimated that. Curious, how are you structuring your teams, in terms of dividing resources and staffing them up? Because you're kind of almost building 2 or 3 mini companies in one. You got hardware, you've got software, then you even have APIs, platforms, all those sorts of things. You can't do everything all at once. Do you take a sequencing approach, or?
Yeah. Again, a small company has to focus on what's accomplishable and what they're good at. I think that over time, we've learned more and more of these different skills. We haven't been really good at marketing in the past. We basically launched on Kickstarter, and we figured out the simplest way that we could explain our product, and that's what worked. That's how we achieved product market fit. I think it's somewhat of an open question for us right now, which is how can we, as a company that's making a platform and a fairly complex product, talk about it to customers and to consumers. we're exploring different ways, especially around the experiences that people can have, whether it's using the Starbucks app on your watch to pay for a coffee, or to check in for a flight using your Pebble, or to control your Nest thermostat or your security system. I think the way that we'll be explaining Pebble in the future to new customers, to people who aren't maybe as geeky as me or potentially some of the people in the room, I think we'll definitely be explaining it through the use cases and the experiences that people can have. The team that's required to do that is different than if you look at it as like an advertising problem or a marketing problem, and it's much more, I think, tractable for engineers and the people that we already have at the company to work on.
Might even be more of a dev-facing, developer-facing kind of team.
Yeah, we look often as, we're a company of engineers. We were started by engineers. That's the kind of foundation. So why go against what you're good at? So we look at problems. We try to analyze them with data. We think about what we're doing now, how we could tweak and tune a little thing to change it, and then kind of grow from there.
Very good. Sonny, thoughts on that? How do you structure the team and juggling, always needing more resources in different sides of the house and
yeah,
the best
it
way
is
to
tough.
prioritize?
It does feel like we have about 12 different job descriptions out at any given time. If we just had UX designer and app developer and backend as our only job descriptions, life would be 4 times simpler, but it's not because it's hardware. So the way we've approached it is a bit unorthodox. We've actually divided up the teams a bit. So as you know, all of our software engineers and almost all of our data science in Vietnam. And so we focus on, in each place where we have some kind of level of competitive advantage, we focus on those job descriptions. Silicon Valley, it's just hardware and firmware and industrial design. That's it. And because if we had to recruit for all of them, I just couldn't pull off what Eric's doing,
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. So one of the reasons I asked about the operating system and software question is you're both now at the point where you're probably getting a lot of inbound requests and calls from potential partners, whether it's the Samsungs or the LGs or others out there. Do you imagine a day where you would get out of the hardware business and basically be a software provider to those folks, or does it not make sense given the strategies that you're taking? How might you work with these potential partners?
So here's a bit of an answer towards that. And I mentioned before that we don't have the final answer to that question. But think about what's popular in terms of wearables, not smart wearables, just wearables in general. Look at clothing, look at accessories, look at fashion. It's very difficult, and there's not a consistent thread between them. You look at phones, and we're pretty much all using the exact same phone with very small variations. We're all using the exact same computers. Everything looks exactly the same. But when it comes to accessories and fashion and wearables and clothing and accessories, everything's a little bit different, and it reflects your own personality and your own persona. So that's a problem that we're looking at right now. And how does a consumer electronics company do that? You look at what just happened with Nike. Nike bailed out of actually making hardware, and they switched into a software focus. So from our perspective, we know that Pebble and Pebble operating system is going to be what we work on. How does that look when we try to attack the fashion problem and the aesthetic problem? How can we as a company spread our platform that developers can hack and build on top of in different form factors and in different kind of aesthetic appearances? This may be through partnerships, it may be through brand partnerships, maybe through embedding our software in other people's devices. But I fundamentally don't think that it's going to be solved necessarily by some big consumer electronics company. I don't think that that's the partnership that I'm most interested in right now. I'm interested in what are people doing today to customize and to accessorize and to create the look that they want to have. Those are the people that I want to talk to.
That's interesting. It kind of says Tom Ford might be a better partner for you than even a Sony or somebody like that. Yeah. Sonny?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be far more excited for a partnership, say, with Coach or with Prada than I would with some of the other large tech companies right now, because we're so early in this space. People often say, "Oh, the wearable space is so crowded," and I'm like, man, that really feels like we're in 1997 and someone telling me the internet is so crowded, there's so many websites. The search is solved. Alta Vista is going to win. Alta Vista? I bet a lot of people here have never even heard of Alta Vista. And things haven't even been dreamed of. I think that even 5 years from now, there's going to be use cases that we haven't even imagined that we will take for granted. If we were here in 2020, we'll be talking about X. And X hasn't even been dreamed of, that I think will be...
What about ingestible computing?
Well, I was going to say next we're going to... It's not wearables, it's internals.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I've worn patches. And like I've had stuff implanted. They're just. I think we're quite far away.
I met someone who was wearing a magnet under their fingertip. They got a magnet embedded so that they could feel electric fields and forces and stuff
I read about that one.
and pick up paper clips and stuff.
Yeah, I think we're pretty far away from mass adoption of that. I think it's
So, for the entrepreneurs out there, one of the most interesting parts is the story behind the story of the growth, especially if you could rewind the clock, the lessons learned or the pitfalls, what would you do differently? These are always the fun ones to think about. If there was some big sort of, facepalm moments.
We've had more than enough problems in the past. I could spend a lot of time. I think there's a couple lessons learned that are kind of bite-sized for us. One is the idea of working with consultants and contractors. And this is, it's probably a problem that people don't really think about too much. They think about the greater problems like building a team and some of the things that we talked about. But at the end of the day, we almost screwed ourselves over completely by relying on external contractors and consultants to help us build core parts of our product.
Was this software or was this like industrial design? Or
so it's
software, got it.
So there are some things that lend themselves to be discreetly chunked up and kind of contracted out. But we made a mistake. We tried to work with an external developer to create the core Bluetooth sort of structure in our very first watch, not Pebble. Yeah. That turned out to be a gigantic mistake.
Right.
And we didn't really know any better at the time. I think with hindsight, what we saw was, we didn't have much money, we didn't have many resources, but we had a lot of problems. And we said, hey, what if we just parcel off these problems to someone else to worry about? But at the end of the day, no one's going to worry about your problems as much as you do. You're the only one, like you and the tight, small group of people that are working at your startup. You're the only people that wake up every single day and care. And it's very difficult to pay someone to care more. So that's a very kind of simplistic lesson that I learned.
That's good advice.
I've learned it 3 or 4 times in a row, so it's you don't have to learn it the first time, you'll learn it eventually.
Well, at beSUCCESS, we lost months just assuming that off-the-shelf Bluetooth software stacks work as advertised, and they just never do. So you're right. Sonny, any big lessons learned or things you would change differently if you could rewind the clock?
Well, we always say that this time around we'd like to make new mistakes,
right.
Because the first 2 startups made a bunch of other dumb mistakes. And one mistake we did learn from the first 2 was being lean. And I think one of the best decisions we did make was in crowdfunding. We really wanted to be, Apple about it and like unveil and say, this is what we're doing. And we just faced reality. We said, you know what, we can't afford to do that. We're like 8 guys in a house. We can't do that. Let's crowdfund, and I'm so glad we did that. It was like one of the best things ever. This is kind of probably particular to us, but I think there may be some lessons learned here is just thinking through the entire experience. And starting with, and in particular, packaging. We went for the moon with packaging. We designed this really cool round package that looked really cool. Probably would win design awards. It was absolutely horrible. It was a disaster. No one could figure out what it was. People thought it was a speaker, and no, it's an activity tracker, people. We underestimated how new this category was, and it totally devastated our sales. So we actually updated the packaging immediately, and that we saw an immediate lift, and it worked, and we've updated it again for the 3rd time, believe it or not, a 3rd time, and now it's even better. But packaging, especially if you're doing hardware, I'm sure there's some analogies to be drawn in software, and that was, just don't forget about packaging, don't forget about the details. Our accessories started out not that great, we're improving them. It's these little things that, I don't know, we were so focused on the thing, on the app, on the hardware, that we forgot the other things that mattered so much.
What's something interesting we learned at beSUCCESS was that almost no one ever orders the basic config. They always want a kit. They want a couple extra straps, they want an extra charger, and as a result, your average order price is always higher than you'd expect. And the good news is, if you think your accessory strategy right, all the margin is often in those areas too. So it behooves you to have accessories built into the plan, but that requires more resources and time and planning too. So it's always interesting. Thank you guys, some excellent insights. So let's give a hand to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.